There is no joke intro here, this is a very serious talk. So, let's begin. So, this concern about Payday 3's future has sort of begun ever since when the Boys in Blue DLC sort of came out. After a couple of weeks, everything has been going well until sort of Almir has started a live stream. And for some of you that have not seen the live stream, I'm going to share a very short clip of it, of what he said here.
I just want to raise something with the Payday community that I think is very important for us to say. You can't be a heister and say, you know what, I'll come back in 2 years. Maybe the game is better then. Like, we need you to be here now and support us now if you want there to be a game in 2 years. You know what I mean? You're leaving a lot to chance if you're a big Payday fan and you're just hoping or assuming that Payday 3 will be around in 5 years if you do not support Payday 3 right now. You know what I mean? So this is a call to action to everyone in the Payday community. If you like what we're cooking now, if you feel that we've listened to you, support us, play the game, buy our DLC, be in the community, watch our streams, you know, share your support. I cannot say this enough, right?
So, I can understand Almir's concern about Payday 3's future, because he is one of those developers that actually genuinely care about the game, and is very much dedicated to actually do his best to save it. But, when I was actually watching this clip, I sort of thought to myself, I don't think Payday 3 will actually die anytime soon, even if players don't play the game right now, as it is. And even when he does say that, we need you right now, and not a few years later, is something I don't think is entirely true, because Payday 3 is in a current position where I think is much more healthier. It is much more better. Let me fix my... there we go. So, why do I think this way? There are a couple of reasons why I think of this way. But let's talk about a few instances where I don't think Payday 3 will sort of suffer some consequences as of yet, and why I think it is able to sort of sustain itself for a couple of years. So, let me give out a couple of examples of why I think Payday 3 is able to last multiple years. If I had to give out my own personal interpretation of how long this game will last, it is most likely going to be 5 years. Do not quote me on that one, but this is simply my overall thought on how long I think. Even though it's not as much as Payday 2's like 10-year hiatus, a game that's like able to last at least 5 years is still solid. But again, this could just be me, and if a miracle happens, the game might even last 10 years. That is, if a miracle happens, but we're gonna have to wait and see for the other two DLCs to sort of come out. So, why do I think that Payday 3 is going to be able to sustain itself for a couple of years? Well, there's a couple of reasons. But first, let's talk about a few moments of Payday 3. So, after the Operation Medic Bag was sort of announced, the amount of players that were in Payday 3 was at least like 300 to 500 players on a daily basis. Normally, when an update from Operation Medic Bag comes out, usually there's only about 1,000 or 1,500 players playing at the game. And then a day after that, or 2 days later, that number goes back to where it originally was, if not slightly higher. However, ever since Syntax Error was sort of brought into Payday 3, the maximum amount of players that have actually came back into Payday 3 was upwards to 4,000 players. However, that number was not able to sustain itself within a few days, as if I remember correctly, and please correct me down in the comments, the player count after like 2 days went from 4,000 to 1,500 in like 2 days or so. Again, I could be wrong about this one, going from my memory. But the reason I think of this way, it's because of two reasons. Lack of content for those who don't own the DLC, and as well as the pricing of the Syntax Error. Now sure, there were some really good amount of stuff coming in from Syntax Error. The heist itself is really good, the weapons themselves are incredibly good, and as well as the outfits are solid, to say at least. But the problem I see about the Syntax Error is the fact that it did not really give that much stuff for the free players. I can't really remember on top of my head what they really gave out apart from the Scrambler skill line. That is the only free stuff I can remember them giving out, and as well as the armor repair kits, and that's pretty much it. I can't really remember anything else, but again, please correct me down in the comments. But because there were not really that much free stuff for the players to try out, some of the players that sort of don't own the DLC, they didn't really have a specific reason to come back other than trying out the new Scrambler skin line. But again, there were some stuff added, but not much to the point where it kept players coming back. But for those who owned the DLC, they were having fun with it, to say at least. They sticked around a couple of days, if not weeks, and then sort of like stopped the game. And then, if I'm remembering this correctly, a week or two later, after the DLC sort of came out, the player numbers sort of slowly came back down. And then a couple of months later, when much more bigger updates from Operation Medivac started rolling out, the player count sort of started to sort of get back much more bigger, but not much, essentially. And much like with the introduction of the adaptive armor and as well as the adrenaline skill tree, the player count sort of stayed around 1,500 players, but much more consistently, because they at least have some new stuff to try out and as well as a new skill tree to test out. So there was some sort of replayability here and there. But when the Boys in Blue DLC came out, the maximum amount of players that sort of came back was around 3.5k players at maximum. This may seem lesser than the syntax error, but keep in mind this number actually stayed around for a couple of days, if not about a week. That player count did not immediately fall off, much like syntax error did. And the reason being for this is there was actually good enough content for both those who don't own the DLC and as well as for those who actually bought the DLC themselves. So there was actually enough stuff for both of the sides to actually mess around with. For those who don't own the DLC, they had a free LMG, they had Clover, and many more fixes and other changes as well. And as well as a new weapon preset, but we're not really going to be talking about that one. But for the Boys in Blue DLC, it is an incredibly fantastic bundle that I feel like a lot of players are sort of shitting on it for no particular reason. Because when I was watching a video on Noli, I don't hate the guy. Here's the thing, like, I dislike the guy, but I don't hate him. But he specifically says that the heist itself is very mediocre, which is something I found absolutely absurd. But I'm not going to go into that rabbit hole as I'm kind of lazy to deal with the dramatic bullshit, so I'm going to stay away from that one. And another thing that they added alongside the Boys in Blue DLC is the introduction of solo mode.
They added an offline mode that doesn't function offline. And if you have no Wi-Fi at all, you can't even make it past the start screen. Figure that shit out, huh? But I'm getting ahead of myself.
Okay, I want you to listen to me very closely. It's not called offline mode if it requires internet connection, you fucking imbeciles. Holy shit, how can you be this dense? Offline mode is something that does not require your internet connection. Solo mode can require internet connection, so that's what Payday 3 has. It uses your computer hardware as a way to create a lobby. But it's not offline mode. Please get that shit right, otherwise keep your fucking mouth shut and don't even bother opening it. Thank you very fucking much. So, the point I'm trying to make is that if Starbreeze is able to release content for both those who don't own the DLC and as well as to those who own the DLC, I feel like the game is able to sustain itself and last for a much more longer period. Look at Boys in Blue as an example. Both those who own the DLC and as well as those who don't own the DLC actually have a purpose to come back. Because they give out Clover, they give out a free LMG, a free weapon preset, and so on and so on. Those who own the DLC get much more bigger stuff to try out and mess around with. So there's actually a reason to sort of come back. And so the game is in a position where it is significantly more healthier and is way more better than one once was. Is it any perfect? No. It's also... excuse me. It's also in a much more better position. It's not good, but it's better. It's not a bad game in my opinion. Although I know there's going to be some dickwad piece of shit coming out of the corner saying like I'm dick riding the game and whatnot, but I don't really fucking care. But regardless. But the point I'm trying to make is if they release these like DLCs in the same way as how Boys in Blue came out, I do genuinely believe that a lot of players will sort of come back to the game and actually enjoy it much more. Another common complaint that I see a lot of Payday players make is the fact that they want the armor system and as well as the skill system to be reworked in a specific way. Now I do somewhat agree that the skill system needs to be reworked. I don't think the entire skill tree needs to be reworked, but the skill themselves needs to be reworked in a way that they can be synergized well. Like make it where every single skill in the game that it exists now be able to synergize with itself now. But other than that, I don't really think that the skill tree themselves needs to be reworked. But again, this is simply my own interpretation. Now, when it comes to the armor system, is something that I'm not really 100% certain on whether or not I'm okay with it being reworked. Right now, it is in a position where it's okay, to say at least. Like, it's not bad, but it's also not good, to say at least. But it's okay, to say at least. There are many ways to get back your armor, but some people want the armor regeneration the same way as Payday 2, which is something I'm not really 100% certain about, but, you know, I'm not really going to describe much on that one, but I did make a video on how I would be reworking them, but other than that, I have no idea what I would really say about this feature, other than I don't know. That's pretty much it. I wish I could really give out a proper explanation of what I would actually do with the armor system, or why I think it should not be reworked. I am practically keeping my mouth shut on this one, as I don't want to piss off the little adaptive armor users, so yeah, anyway. But again, this is simply my idea. But the whole point I'm trying to make is the fact that because we're getting more DLCs later down the line, and as well as more free stuff, I do genuinely believe that Payday 3 will be in a much more better position, because there will be a free heist either next or in the next upcoming month. So, and after Payday 3's first anniversary, offline mode will sort of come back. So yeah, because right now we only have solo mode, and that is on beta, but so far it is actually running pretty well. And the thing is, I do genuinely believe that Starbase is able to sort of pull the game back and put it in a much more better position, but right now we're in a position where the game needs to actually, or the devs themselves needs to sort of start to put their foot on the ground and actually put some effort to it. I'm not saying like the effort they put is like completely useless. I'm saying that they need to sort of work much more harder, because if the upcoming 2 DLCs are not particularly great, then I highly doubt Payday 3 will not be lasting long. But if they're good, if everything about them is good, then I do genuinely believe that Payday 3 has a higher chance of being able to sustain itself. And people have sort of theorized that Payday 3 will stop being developed after the first year of DLCs. But the game director himself on Twitter has specifically said that this is not really the idea of choice that they're planning on, but he's planning on continuing the game for about 2 or 3 years or so. So this is not really a confirmation, but more of a highly possibility that they will continue even after the first year of Payday 3. But I do genuinely believe that Starbreeze will not stop the game. I don't think that will ever happen anytime soon, because if the other 2 DLCs, and as well as the free heist itself does well, then I do believe it will sort of revive itself, because they need to add enough content for both players who don't own the bundle, and as well as to those who own the bundle, if that makes any sense. But again, this is simply my own interpretation, and my own theory. But to summarize it in a much more shorter way, because of the way the Boys in Blue DLC sort of helped the game and patched it up a little bit, if the other 2 DLCs sort of apply the same way as the Boys in Blue did, then I genuinely believe Payday 3 has a possibility of living upwards to 5 years. But this is simply my own theory, so do not quote me on this one. But what about the Almir speech? Well, I don't really have much else to say besides I can understand his fear. Like, I can't really say much, because if the sales are not going well, then the higher-ups are just simply going to pull the plug on them. So let's just hope to God that never actually happens. So yeah, we're gonna have to wait and see, I suppose. Regardless, I'll see you people next time. Goodbye, and let's just hope that Payday 3 is able to be saved. Goodbye.